In the last column, we saw how the center takes money from richer states such as Maharashtra, Tamil Nadu, Gujarat and Karnataka and gives it to the poorer states such as Bihar, Uttar Pradesh, Bengal and Madhya Pradesh. This sort of redistribution happens in most countries. This is to help the poorer states develop faster and close the gap with the richer states. In most countries, this works. In the 70 years of such redistribution in India, have the poorer states closed the gap with the richer states? In 1960, the average person in Bihar earned 215 rupees a year. At the same time, the average person in a rich state such as Maharashtra earned 400 rupees, double. Today, we would expect the average person in Maharashtra to earn less than double of that of the average person in Bihar, right? No. The average person in Maharashtra today earns 4 times more than the average person in Bihar. This gap between the average incomes of a Bihari and a person in Maharashtra has actually increased significantly, not reduced as we would have expected. Over the last 50 years, the average person in the richer states has earned 1.5 times more than the average person in Bihar or the poorer states, which has now gone up to 3 times. So India is experiencing exactly the opposite of what we all expected, not convergence but divergence. Okay, maybe in income, the gap between the rich states and the poor states has increased. What about other social parameters? One such indicator is the average age of the person living in a particular state. As we get richer, we tend to have fewer children and we live longer. So the average age in a state increases. In 1960, the average person in the poorer states was 20 years old, whereas the average person in the richer states was 21 years old. Today, the average person in the poorer states continues to be 20 years old, while the average person in the richer states is 26 years old. In fact, the average Bihari today is just 19 years old, whereas the average Tamilian is 30 years old. So when people say India is a young country, it really depends on which India they're talking about. Similarly, in literacy rate, 80% of people in the poorer states were illiterate in 1960, whereas 70% of the people in the richer states were illiterate. Today, only 20% of people in the richer states are illiterate, but 35% of people in the poorer states are still illiterate. So even in education and literacy, the gap between the richer states and the poorer states has not closed. So, contrary to expectations, in almost all parameters, economic or social, the gap between the rich states and the poor states have only increased over the last 50 years. The few rich states continue to provide bulk of the resources for the development of the poorer states, but does not seem to be working. At some point, these richer states are going to question the need for providing such resources to the poorer states as their own needs for resources increase when their population ages. Shouldn't the governments of the poor states be held more accountable